Black Antler Basin. The snow started a little after 4, the kind that doesn't fall so much as drifts sideways, like the sky can't make up its mind. I sat on the porch of the Hollow Creek Ranger Station with a cup of coffee going cold in my hands, watching the tree line disappear into gray. Out here, 60 miles past the last paved road in the Cabinet Mountains, the silence has weight. People who've never lived in real wilderness think quiet is the absence of sound. It isn't. Quiet is its own thing. It presses on your ears. It makes you listen harder, and the harder you listen, the more you start to hear things that aren't there. I'd been alone at Hollow Creek for 3 years. That was the point. After Kandahar, after the thing in the Bitterroots I don't talk about, the Forest Service gave me the most remote posting they had, and I took it like a man taking medicine he knows tastes bad but needs anyway. No neighbors. No cell signal. Just me, a single-band radio, a wood stove, and 400,000 acres of timber that didn't care whether I lived or died. That night the radio crackled at 4:40. Dispatch out of Libby. A young voice named Reyes I'd talked to maybe twice. Hollow Creek, you copy? Copy, Libby. Go ahead. Got a report of an abandoned vehicle, looks like a logging contractor's truck, parked off the old Forest Road 218 spur. Near the gate too. A pause, papers shuffling. Black Antler Basin. I set my coffee down. Black Antler Basin had been closed since before I got here. Officially it was contaminated ground, an old mining lease that had gone bad, soil too poisoned to log or hike. There were signs. There were gates. In 3 years I'd never had reason to go in, and nobody had ever asked me to. Say again the location. FR 218 spur, about half a mile shy of the basin gate. Caller was a trucker who saw it from the Ridge Road this morning. Said the door was open. Said there was another pause. He said there was blood on the windows. We tried to raise the county, but the sheriff's office is slow to answer up there. You're the closest. Can you take a look before dark? Before dark. It was already going gray. But a truck with the door hanging open and blood on the glass isn't something you leave overnight. Not in country where the temperature drops to single digits and a hurt man can freeze in 2 hours. Copy, Libby. En route. If you don't hear from me by 2100, send the county. Copy that. Be safe, Hollow Creek. I loaded my rifle, a bolt-action .30-06 I trusted more than anything else I owned, and I took the shotgun too, an old Remington 870 with a sling. I told myself it was for the slim chance of an aggressive bear. I had hunted and tracked in these mountains long enough that I'd stopped lying to myself about most things, but I still let that one go. The FR 218 spur is a logging track that the forest is busy reclaiming. My truck bucked over frost heaves and roots, headlights cutting weak cones through the falling snow. The light was dying fast. By the time I found the contractor's truck, a white crew cab Ford with a logging company decal on the door, the world had gone the blue of late dusk. The driver's door stood open, exactly as reported. I parked 30 feet back, killed my engine, and sat for a moment listening. Nothing. Not a bird, not the click of cooling metal, not wind in the pines. The forest had gone completely silent, and that bothered me more than blood would have. I got out with the shotgun. The snow on the road lay in a clean, unbroken sheet, except where something had disturbed it, and the sight of those marks made my stomach tighten. The inside of the truck was bad. Not a lot of blood, but the wrong kind of arrangement. There were handprints smeared down the inside of the windshield and the driver's window, the prints of someone trying to push out, to claw at glass that wouldn't break. Drag marks crossed the bench seat. The keys were still in the ignition. A travel mug sat in the cup holder, frozen solid. A man's wool glove lay on the floor mat, just one, and there was a smell in the cab, under the iron tang of blood, that I couldn't place. Musk and rot and something chemical like burnt plastic. No body. I looked for one. Out the open door, the snow told the rest of it. There were drag marks leading away from the truck into the trees, 2 shallow grooves where a man's heels had carved through the powder. And on either side of those grooves, pressed deep, were footprints. I crouched over them with my flashlight, and I felt the cold come up through me that has nothing to do with weather. They were the prints of a man. Bare feet, 5 toes, the arch and heel right where they should be. But they were huge, easily 18 inches long, and the stride between them was wrong, far too long, 6 feet or more, the gait of something tall and unhurried. And they were two-legged. The whole way. No knuckle marks, no front paws, nothing dropping to all fours. Whatever had dragged that man into the woods had walked out on two legs carrying him, like a person carrying a sleeping child. I'm not a man who scares easy. I've seen what people do to each other in places without law. But kneeling there in the snow, I had the powerful animal sense of being watched, the back of my neck telling me what my eyes couldn't confirm. I stood slowly and swept the tree line with my light. The pines stood black and close and gave me nothing. Then from somewhere up the slope toward the basin I heard it. It was a cry long and rising and falling, and at first my mind tried to file it as a wolf. But it wasn't a wolf. There was something underneath the howl, a wet rasping quality, and worse, there were shapes in it, almost like a wolf's voice trying to make the sounds a human mouth would make. It rose into something that was very nearly a word, held it, and let it drop into a low chuckling that no animal makes. The hair on my arms stood up. I'd planned to follow the drag marks. I didn't. Every part of my body that had kept me alive in bad places told me to go back to the truck, and I learned a long time ago to obey that voice. I walked backward to my vehicle, shotgun up, watching the trees. I got in. I turned the key, and the radio, which had been silent, came alive with a hiss of static, and through the static came a voice. Mason. Just my name. Faint. Then static again. I sat very still. Nobody at Libby knew to call me Mason. To dispatch I was Hollow Creek or Ranger Hale. The voice had been low male, and it had sounded almost exactly like Tom Reyes, my old spotter, who had been dead for 11 years. I shut the radio off. I told myself it was atmospheric skip, a stray transmission warped by the mountains. I told myself a lot of things on the drive back, and the snow kept falling, and somewhere behind me in the dark the forest kept its silence like a held breath. I should explain about Tom, because it matters for what came after, for the way the thing in those woods got into the soft part of my head. 11 years ago, in the Bitterroot Range, I led a two-man search for a downed hunter in a whiteout. Tom Reyes was my partner. The conditions turned, command called us back, and I made the decision to push on anyway because I believed the hunter was close and alive. He wasn't close. We got separated in the storm. I found my way to a ridge and shelter. Tom didn't. They found him 4 days later, a mile from where I'd told him to wait, frozen, his face turned back toward where I'd gone, like he'd died watching for me to come back for him. I never came back for him. That's the whole of it. I made a call, and a good man died, and I have heard his voice in bad dreams for 11 years. So when a radio in the middle of nowhere said Mason in something close to Tom's voice, it did not bounce off me. It went straight in. I made it back to Hollow Creek as full dark settled. I tried to raise Libby on the station's main set to report what I'd found, to get the county rolling. The radio gave me nothing but a low hiss. I checked the antenna lead, the power, the frequency. Everything was right. The set just wouldn't reach. I'd had dead patches before, weather and solar activity, but never a total wall like this. I decided to drive back toward the ridge where I knew I could get a signal. I made it 400 yards down my own access road before my headlights caught the tree. A lodgepole pine, full-grown, maybe 60 feet of it, lay across the road. It hadn't fallen. The base wasn't a stump snap or a wind throw with the root ball torn up. It had been pushed, or carried, and laid across the road with the trunk angled to block both the road and the shallow ditch beside it. The cut end, where it had separated from its stump somewhere up the slope, was splintered in a way I'd never seen. Not sawn, not beaver gnawed, just broken, as if something had wrenched a living tree apart with its hands. I sat in my truck with the engine running and the heater going, and I understood, in a cold and complete way, that I was being kept here. Not trapped by accident. Kept. The truck couldn't pass. The radio couldn't reach. And the thing in the woods had a reason to want me where it could find me. A normal animal does not block a road. I backed up to the station. I went inside, I bolted the door, I built the fire up, and I put the rifle across my knees, and I waited for morning. And I did not sleep, and a few times in the long middle of the night I heard, far off, and then not so far off, that rising falling cry that was almost a wolf and almost a man, and was neither. Clara Voss arrived at first light, on foot, out of the trees, and I nearly shot her. I'd stepped out at dawn to check the perimeter, and a figure came out of the fog at the edge of the clearing, and my rifle was up and on her before my brain caught up with my hands. She froze, put her palms out. She was maybe 40, weathered, dressed for the backcountry in good gear that had seen real use, a heavy pack on her shoulders. "Don't shoot. I'm with Fish and Wildlife. My name's Clara Voss." Her voice was steady, which I respected. People who panic in front of a leveled rifle usually have less self-control elsewhere too. I lowered the gun, but I didn't sling it. "You walked in here? From where?" "I've got a research camp 2 ridges over. I've been monitoring this area for months." She came closer, slow, hands still visible. "I heard a vehicle on the spur last evening, and then nothing. I came to check. Are you the ranger?" "Hale. Mason Hale." I studied her. Her eyes kept moving, scanning the tree line behind me, the way mine had been doing all night. She knew. Whatever this was, she already knew about it. Monitoring the area for what, exactly? She hesitated, and in that hesitation I learned my first true thing about Clara Voss. She was a person who decided how much truth to give you based on what it would cost her. "Wildlife behavior," she said. "Unusual predation patterns. Cattle losses on the ranch's downslope. Game animals turning up wrong. I've been trying to document the cause." "And have you documented it?" She looked at me a long moment. "Can I come inside?" "It's not safe to stand in the open. Not at the tree line. Not here." I let her in. I told myself I needed the company of someone who knew something, and that was true, but it wasn't the whole reason. The whole reason was that she'd said not safe to stand in the open the way you say a thing you've learned the hard way, and I wanted to know what she'd learned and how. Over coffee, I told her about the truck, the prints, the corpse-less drag marks, the felled tree, the cry. She listened without interrupting, and she didn't tell me I was mistaken or that I'd seen a bear, which is what a person playing dumb would have done. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. "The prints," she said. "Bipedal. 5 toes. Long stride. You've seen them. I've cast them." She pulled a tablet from her pack, woke it, turned it to me. A photo of a plaster cast, a measuring tape beside it reading 19 inches. "I have a dozen of these. I have hair samples that come back from the lab as mammal, unclassified. I have audio." She tapped, and her own voice came out small from the speaker. A recording wind, and then that cry, that horrible almost language howl, closer and clearer than I'd heard it, and at the end of it, unmistakably, a sound like a man's voice saying help me before dissolving back into the inhuman. I felt my coffee go sour in my gut. "What is it?" "I don't fully know," she said. "But I know it isn't a wolf. And I know it didn't just wander in. Mason, before I tell you the rest, I need you to understand that some of what's out here is not an animal problem. It's a people problem. And the people involved are dangerous in ways the thing in the woods is not." We went to find the second corpse together, because I needed to see what she'd been documenting, and because neither of us wanted to be alone. She led me up an old skid trail toward the basin gate, and we crossed it, stepped over a fallen sign that read restricted, contaminated area, and no entry, and into Black Antler Basin proper. The forest changed almost at once. The trees here were sick, needles browning, bark split, and there were dead zones where nothing grew at all, the soil a strange ashy gray. The chemical smell I'd caught in the truck was here too, threaded through the air. We found the body in a stand of dead pines a quarter-mile in. I have seen death. I want that understood, so that you understand what I mean when I say I had never seen anything like this. The man, what was left of him, had been suspended between 2 trunks, 8 feet off the ground, his arms lashed out to either side with his own unwound intestines, knotted around the trees like rope. He'd been opened from throat to groin and emptied, and the empty cavity had been packed with pine boughs and stones. His head was tilted down, watching the approach, and he hadn't been eaten. That was the thing my mind kept circling. A bear eats. A wolf eats. This man had been taken apart and arranged, displayed, like a scarecrow, like a warning sign in a language without words. Whatever did this wasn't feeding. It was communicating. Clara stood beside me, pale, and she didn't look away. "There've been 6 like this," she said quietly. "Always posed. Always facing a trail or a road. Always at the edge of the basin, where someone's likely to find them." She swallowed. "It's marking a boundary, Mason. It's telling people to stay out." "Out of where?" She turned and looked deeper into the basin, toward where the dead ground rose to a ridge, and behind the ridge, a darker shape I hadn't noticed, the rusted skeleton of industrial structures. "Out of there," she said. "I think it's guarding what they did." The mining camp was a graveyard. We came down into it as the morning fog burned thin, and what we found was a facility that had died violently. There'd been a cluster of buildings, prefab offices, equipment sheds, a fuel depot, the headframe of a mine shaft. Now it was wreckage. Vehicles flipped and torn. A bulldozer on its side, the cab crushed inward like a beer can. Storage containers ripped open. And everywhere, in the snow and the gray dirt, the remains of people. Not posed here. Just killed. Scattered, partial, old enough that the cold and the scavengers had been at them. I counted what I could and stopped at 9. Some of them still wore the orange and yellow of work crews. Some wore tactical gear, black, with empty holsters, and beside one I found a rifle, military pattern, the barrel bent 90 degrees. "Who were they?" I asked. "The work crew were contractors," Clara said. "The men in black were a private security team. They came in about 8 months ago. None of them came out." She moved through the wreckage like she'd been here before, and I realized she had. She went to the largest intact structure, the main office, and forced the buckled door. Inside, filing cabinets had been thrown around, but the contents survived. While Clara searched one side, I searched the other, and in a fireproof safe that had been wrenched open, the door peeled back like a sardine tin, I found the files that changed everything. Photographs. Documents. A company called Veritas Extraction Group held the mineral lease on Black Antler Basin. But the documents weren't about mining. They were about disposal. For years, Veritas had used the basin as an illegal dump for industrial chemical waste hauled in from operations across 3 states, the kind of toxic material that costs a fortune to dispose of legally. They'd been paid to make it disappear, and they'd buried it in the basin and poisoned the ground I was standing on. And then there was the other thing. A second set of files, marked with a different logo, a stylized helix. Research protocols, veterinary records, something they called the Apex Predator Resilience Program. Photographs of caged animals, wolves and bears, with growths and deformities. Logs of specimens, numbered, with notes on size and aggression and cognitive response. The chemical waste hadn't just been dumped. Some group, using Veritas's poison basin as a private laboratory, had been deliberately exposing predators to the contamination, breeding and selecting for size, for resilience, for intelligence, studying what the poison made of them. One file was thicker than the rest. Specimen 7. The photographs documented something that started as a wolf and stopped being one. Page after page, larger, the limbs lengthening, the skull reshaping, the last clear photograph showing a creature crouched in a cage that filled the frame, black-furred, and looking into the camera with pale yellow eyes that held something no animal's eyes hold. The final entry in the log was 3 words: Specimen 7 escaped. The date was 9 months ago, and clipped to the back of the file was a memo, on county letterhead, signed by Sheriff Roy Danton, advising Veritas on how to manage the disappearances of personnel, recommending which families would not pursue inquiries, which reports to file as wilderness accidents, which roads to keep closed. The sheriff knew. The Forest Service supervisors who'd kept the basin closed and unwatched knew. They'd all known for months, and they'd buried it the way Veritas buried the waste. I stood there with the proof of it in my hands, and I understood why my radio wouldn't reach, why the road was closed, why a young dispatcher I'd barely met had sent me, the isolated ranger with no family and no neighbors, up here alone. I wasn't an investigator. I was a loose end being walked into a place where loose ends disappeared. "You knew about all of this," I said to Clara. It wasn't a question. She didn't deny it. She was holding a file of her own, and her hands weren't steady anymore. "My brother was on the research team," she said. "David. He was a field biologist. He believed they were doing legitimate conservation work, recovery of contaminated land. By the time he understood what they really were, he was in too deep to walk away clean." She looked at the wreckage out the window. "He came in with the capture team 8 months ago, the one that was supposed to bring Specimen 7 back into containment." Her voice cracked. "He's out there somewhere. One of these." She gestured at the dead. "I came to find out what happened to him. That's the truth. I believed about half of it. I'd come to understand that with Clara, The truth was always a portion, never the whole. That was when Eli Mercer came screaming out of the mine. We heard him before we saw him, a raw shrieking that echoed up out of the head frame, and then a figure hauled itself up out of the shaft opening into the daylight. A man, filthy and bloody and barely human in the way he moved. He saw us and came at a stumbling run, and he had a knife, and Clara had to step behind me as he reached us. "You," he was screaming. "You did this, you brought them here, this is you." He was pointing the knife at Clara with a hand missing 2 fingers, the wounds old and badly healed. I got between them and put a hand flat on his chest. "Easy, easy. Drop the knife. Nobody's hurting anybody." He looked at me, and there was nothing steady in his eyes at all. He'd been down there a long time. "You can't be here," he whispered. "It's coming back. It always comes back at dark. You can't be here when it's dark." He sagged, and I caught him, and the knife fell from his hand into the snow. His name was Eli Mercer. He'd been part of a second crew, sent in 3 months ago, a salvage crew told they were recovering equipment, not told what had happened to the first. He was the only one left. He'd survived by going down into the old mine workings and staying there, in the dark, coming up only to scavenge from the dead, while the thing hunted the surface above him. And he hated Clara Voss with a focus that cut through even his madness. "She knows what it is," he said, gripping my coat. "She's known the whole time. Her people made it. Her brother fed it people, trying to study how it killed. That's what the research was. They wanted to see how smart it was, how it learned, so they gave it men to hunt." He started to laugh, a terrible sound. "It learned. Oh, it learned good. It learned faces. It learned names. It knows who did it. It's not killing everybody. You watch. It's not killing everybody." I looked at Clara. Her face had gone to stone. "Is that true?" I said. "Did your brother's team use people as test subjects?" "I didn't know that part," she said, and for the first time I heard real fear in her, the fear of someone realizing a thing about her own blood that she'd refused to look at. "I swear to you I didn't know that." But I was no longer sure Clara Voss had ever told me anything she didn't have a reason to. The light started to die around 4 again, the way it does in those mountains in that season, and with the light went any pretense that the thing would leave us alone. It started with the cold. Not weather cold. A localized drop, the kind you feel walking past an open freezer, and with it the chemical musk rolling down out of the basin. Then the sounds. It began circling the camp at the edge of the wreckage, and it began to talk. That's the only word for it. It used voices. From the dark beyond the buildings, in Tom Reyes's voice, it said, "Mason. Mason, I waited for you." And then in a woman's voice, soft, "David? David, is that you?" And I saw Clara go white because it was using her brother's name in a voice I think was her brother's. It had heard us. It had been listening, learning our names, learning our wounds, and now it was using them, threading sounds together from the voices of everyone it had ever killed, to pull us apart, to make us doubt the dark in each other. Then it cut the generator. We'd gotten a small camp generator running for the lights inside the office. Between one breath and the next, it died, and we were in the dark, and the dark was full of that voice trying out names. Eli was sobbing. I had the rifle up and useless because you cannot shoot what you cannot see, and I understood the strategy of it then fully. It was intelligent, and it did not fight the way an animal fights. It fought the way I'd been trained to fight. Isolate. Disorient. Degrade the enemy's senses and morale before you close. It cut the lights because it didn't need them. It took the high ground of the dark and made us small inside it. When I went for the shotgun I'd leaned by the door, it was gone. It had taken it, reached into the doorway in the dark and taken a weapon, the way a man would disarm an opponent, and somewhere out in the night I heard it work the action of the pump, CHK, clumsy and deliberate, showing me it understood what the weapon was. Showing me it could. That was the worst moment of my life up to then, hearing my own shotgun racked by something in the dark that wanted me to know it had learned to use it. We held in the office through the worst of the night, the 3 of us, my rifle and a propane lantern between us and the dark, and the thing toyed with us, and I felt my mind starting to come apart at the edges. It kept using Tom's voice. "I waited for you, Mason. For days I waited. You never came." And the rational part of me knew it was a creature stitching sounds together to break me, and the other part of me, the part that had carried Tom Reyes for 11 years, kept answering him in my head, kept saying I'm sorry, I'm coming. Twice I almost went out into the dark after the voice. Clara stopped me once. Eli stopped me once, gripping my arm with his ruined hand, hissing, "That's how it gets you. That's exactly how it gets the ones who feel guilty. It can smell it on you. It can smell what you hate about yourself." And I realized he was right, that it had taken my measure and found the seam in me, and was working it like a knife in a crack. Around what I think was 3 in the morning, Clara made her move, and I learned the last true thing about her. I'd dozed, the kind of micro-sleep you can't fight after enough hours. I came awake because she was at my pack, and she had a hard-sided case out of her own pack, the size of a lunchbox, and she was transferring something into it from a small cooler, vials, blood dark and half-frozen. I watched her without moving for a moment, the way you watch to learn a thing before the other person knows you're awake. "What is that?" I said. She didn't startle. She'd known I might wake. "Specimen samples," she said, closing the case. "Blood. Tissue. From the kill sites. From the bodies." She looked at me levelly. "Mason, I'm going to tell you the truth now, because you've earned it, and because I think we may not survive the morning. I don't work for fish and wildlife. Not really. I work for a group that has been trying to acquire viable biological material from Specimen 7 for over a year. What's in this case is worth more than this whole basin. A predator that adapted to that level of contamination, that grew that intelligent, the genetics of it." She caught herself. "I came for this. Finding out about my brother was real. But it was never the only reason. It wasn't even the main one. You came to harvest it," I said. "The same thing that made it. Your people are the Helix logo in those files. A successor organization. Yes." She held the case against her chest. "I'm not asking you to forgive it. I'm telling you because in a few hours one of us may have to make a choice, and I want you to make it knowing what I am." I didn't say anything. There wasn't anything to say. I'd known she was a portion of a truth, and now I had the whole of it, and the whole of it was that Clara Voss had come up into these mountains, walked through fields of murdered men, used me as a guide and a guard, all to carry out a vial of the thing that had killed them, to give to the kind of people who had made it in the first place. The cycle of it, the same poison, dressed in a new logo, reaching for the same prize. I should have hated her cleaner than I did. But I was sitting there carrying my own dead man's voice, having almost walked into the dark after him 3 times in one night, and I had learned long ago that everybody up here was carrying something, and most of what people did, the worst of it, came out of what they carried. It didn't make her right. It just made her a person, which is somehow worse. The sheriff came at dawn, and he didn't come to save us. We heard the engines first, 2 trucks grinding up the basin road, and for one stupid hopeful moment Eli said, "They're here, somebody's here." Before I put it together, the road had been blocked behind me with a felled tree to keep me in. Whoever was driving up that road now had cleared it, or had come from the other direction, the controlled direction, and the only people who controlled the roads into Black Antler Basin were the people who'd been hiding it. I pulled Eli and Clara back into the wreckage as the trucks rolled into the camp. 6 men got out. They wore the same black tactical gear as the dead security team, and they carried rifles, and at the front of them, in a county sheriff's coat with a star on the chest, was a heavy-shouldered man with a gray mustache and the calm, unbothered face of a man who has done this kind of thing before and slept fine after. Sheriff Roy Danton. I knew the face from the file photo. He stood in the middle of the dead camp and called out, easy and friendly, "Ranger Hale? Mason? It's Sheriff Danton's son. Heard you got stranded up here. Come on out, we'll get you home." I stayed in the dark of the building. Beside me, Clara had gone very still, and Eli had stopped breathing almost entirely. "I'd surely like to talk to you, Mason," Danton called. "I know what you found. I know it's a hell of a thing. But there's a way to handle a thing like this and a way to make it worse, and I'd hate for you to make it worse." He waited. The friendliness stayed in his voice, but it had gone thin over the top of something flat. "Don't make me come find you, son. These boys get nervous in these woods, and I can't always control where they point." There it was. He'd as good as said it. He'd come up here with 6 guns to clean up the witnesses, me and Clara and Eli, the same way they'd cleaned up everyone before us. File it as a wilderness accident. 3 more people the mountains took. I had a rifle, 1 rifle, against 6 trained men in the open. I am not invincible, and I have never once in my life confused myself with a man who could win that fight head-on. So I did the only thing a man in my position could do. I used the one ally in that basin that outclassed all of us. I cupped my hands and I called back loud into the dawn. Sheriff, it's coming back at dark. You're standing right where it kills. You and your men are standing in its house. I wanted them rattled. I wanted them looking at the tree line instead of at the buildings. And I wanted, more than that, for the thing in the woods to hear me name them, to hear me put these new men in the place of the men whose blood was already in the snow. Danton laughed, but two of his men didn't. What happened over the next hour, I have told the investigation committee in plain terms, and they have written it down in their plain terms, and none of it captures the truth of it. Danton sent his men into the wreckage to flush us. They came in pairs, professional, clearing the buildings. We ran. I knew the camp by then. I knew the gaps and the buckled containers and the place where the office connected by a half-collapsed tunnel to the head frame in the mine. I took Clara and Eli down into the dark, into the one place I knew the thing had let Eli live for 3 months, and we went down into the workings of the mine with 6 armed men coming behind us and the daylight dying above. I won't pretend it was a clean plan. It wasn't. It was a desperate man's plan, built on one bet, that the thing in the woods was not a random killer. Eli had said it, raving in the snow. It's not killing everybody. It learned who did it. I had read the files. The creature had been tortured into existence by people, fed prisoners by people, hunted by Danton's security team, covered up by Danton's pen. It posed its kills facing the roads as warnings. It guarded the basin against the ones who'd made it. It was not a monster that killed for hunger. It was a monster that killed for reckoning, and I gambled my life and 2 others on the idea that I, a witness who had touched none of the crime, was not on its list, and that the 6 men coming down into the dark behind me were on nothing else. Down in the mine, in the dark, with the chemical seep dripping off the walls, the reckoning came. It took the first 2 before they knew it was there. I heard it from a side gallery where I'd pulled Clara and Eli into a flooded sump, the 3 of us up to our chests in freezing black water that hid our scent and our heat. I heard Danton's men moving by lamplight in the main drift, and then I heard the thing arrive, and the way I knew it had arrived was that the lamplight stopped moving, and one of the men made a sound I can't write down, a short high sound a grown man should not be able to make, and then there was the wet heavy work of it. I had seen the posed body in the trees. I had seen the camp, but I had not, until then, heard the thing actually killing a man up close, and I will hear it for the rest of my life. It was fast and it was thorough, and it was, in some way I can't justify, deliberate. It did not simply kill. It dismantled, and between the sounds of the work it made a low satisfied chuckling, the almost human sound from the first night, and once, distinctly, in a voice it had taken from someone, it said a name, one of the names off the duty roster in the files. Reese. Like it was reading the dead man his own name off the page of his crimes before it finished him. The other men opened fire into the dark. You could hear the panic in it, the full auto roar of men shooting at shapes and shadows, muzzle flashes strobing down the drift, rounds spanging off rock. And in the strobe I saw it, for the first time, whole. It stood upright, and it was huge, easily 8 feet, hunched under the low ceiling of the drift. Black fur matted with the seep. The long, wrong limbs from the last photograph in the file, arms that hung past where a man's knees would be, hands that were almost hands. The head was the worst of it, a long muzzle but a high skull, and set in it, catching the muzzle flashes, 2 flat yellow eyes that did not have 1 ounce of animal panic in them. It moved through their gunfire like a man walking through rain, annoyed, unhurried, and it took the 3rd man by the head, and I looked away. I got Clara and Eli moving while the thing was occupied, deeper into the workings, toward a ventilation rise I'd seen marked on a corroded mine map in the office, a vertical shaft that might get us to the surface on the far side of the camp. Behind us the gunfire stopped 1 weapon at a time. We surfaced through the ventilation rise into the last gray light of the day, into the dead trees on the ridge above the camp, and there, waiting at the top with a rifle, calm as Sunday, was Sheriff Danton. He'd never gone down into the dark. Of course he hadn't. He'd sent his men into the mine to do the killing, and he'd stayed up top to catch whatever came running out the back, because that's the kind of man he was, the kind who signs the memo, and lets other men's hands do the work and keeps his own coat clean. He had us. Eli half drowned and shaking, Clara clutching her precious case, me with a rifle slung that I'd never get up before he fired. Smart, Danton said, nodding at the ventilation rise. Real smart, Ranger. Knew you were resourceful. Shame. He shifted the rifle to cover me square. For what it's worth, son, I never wanted any of this. Veritas made a mess. The science folks made a worse one. I just kept the lid on. That's all I ever did. Kept the lid on so people didn't panic, so the families didn't suffer the not knowing. He actually believed it. You could see it. He'd told himself the story so long it had become true to him, that covering 9 murders and feeding men to a monster was a kind of public service. You'd have understood, I think. You're a lid keeper too. 3 years up here alone, keeping your own lid on. We're not so different. We're nothing alike, I said. And behind him, out of the dead trees, without a sound, the dart came up the slope. I saw it before he did. I saw the yellow eyes catch the last light, low and level, fixing on the back of Roy Danton's clean coat. And I understood that the thing had followed us up the rise not to finish us, but because the last name on its list was standing in front of me with a star on his chest. The architect. The lid keeper. The man whose signature was on the memo that turned 9 murders into wilderness accidents. I had a choice. I could warn him. He was a man, a human being, and there is a thing in me, the same thing that's haunted me 11 years over Tom Reyes, that does not let another person die in front of me without trying. My mouth opened, and I thought about the camp full of dead men, and the body posed in the trees with its own guts for rope, and the families Danton had decided wouldn't ask too many questions. And I closed my mouth, and I stepped to the side slow, and I let the dark do what it had come a long way and a long time to do. Danton saw it in my face, the looking past him. He turned. He got the rifle halfway around. The thing took him at the waist and lifted him off the ground like he weighed nothing, and the sound he made was the same short, high sound his men had made, and I took Clara by the arm and Eli by the collar, and I turned them away, and we went down the far side of the ridge in the falling dark while behind us Sheriff Roy Danton was made into a warning. We came down out of the dead trees onto the basin road, and there, where the road bent toward the gate and the long way out, Clara made her last choice, and I made mine. She stopped. She had the case against her chest, the blood of the thing inside it, worth more than the basin, worth more than the lives it had cost to gather. There's a vehicle, she said, fast, breathless. Danton's trucks, at the camp, the keys'll be in them. I can make the gate. Mason, I can get this out. Do you understand what's in here? It changes everything. It's the most important biological discovery in. It's the same poison, I said. You'll hand it to the same kind of people who made it. And in a year or 5 years there'll be another basin, and another thing in the dark, and more men posed in more trees. I looked at her, and I didn't hate her, which was the strange part. I just saw her clearly. Your brother thought he was doing science too. She flinched at that, but she didn't put the case down. She backed away from me toward the camp, toward Danton's trucks, and she said, I'm sorry. I am, but I'm not leaving it. And she turned and ran for the camp. I let her go. That was my choice, and I have thought about it every day since, and I make it the same way every time. I could have stopped her. I had a rifle, and she had her hands full of a box. But the camp was where the dark lived, and the dark was busy on the ridge behind me with Danton, and it would be done soon. Then it would come down hungry for the last guilty name on its list, and Clara Voss had spent a year of her life and a fortune of other people's blood putting herself onto that list. She had harvested it. She had served the thing that made it. In the ledger that the creature kept, the ledger I had bet all our lives on understanding, Clara Voss was not a witness. She was a perpetrator. I turned away and I took Eli Mercer, who I did not like and did not trust, and who had spent 3 months eating from the dead, and I half carried him down the basin road toward the gate, because Eli, whatever was broken in him, had committed no part of the crime. He'd been lied to and sent in and left to rot. He was like me, a witness. And I had come, over one long night and one longer day, to believe that the thing in the woods knew the difference, and that the only way out of Black Antler Basin alive was to deserve to be let out. Behind us, from the direction of the camp, in the full dark, I heard Clara Voss scream once, and then not again. We walked out. That's the plain truth of it, the thing the committee found hardest to accept. A man and a half-dead salvage worker walked 12 miles out of a restricted basin in the dark, past the felled tree, down the spur, to the ridge road where my radio finally caught a signal, and not once on that long walk did the dark touch us. Once near the gate, I felt the cold drop and smelled the chemical musk and knew it was pacing us in the trees, close, a black shape between black trunks, the yellow eyes. I stopped. I made Eli stop. I turned and faced it, the way you face a thing you've decided not to run from, and I said the only thing I had to say to it. I'm a witness, I said. I'll tell it. All of it. Every name. And the yellow eyes held on me for a long moment in the dark, weighing me the way it had weighed me the first night, finding the seam in me, and this time finding, I think, that the seam ran true. And then they were gone, no sound, no parting, just gone, and the cold lifted, and Eli started to cry, and we walked the last miles out alone. It hadn't spared me, because I was strong. I want that understood. I didn't beat it. No man beats that. It let me leave because a warning needs someone to carry it, and a reckoning needs a witness to read the names, and I had become, somewhere in that basin, the thing it needed me to be. Not a hero, a messenger. The dark had use for me, and that use was the only reason I came down off that mountain breathing. It's been 7 months. I testified before the Federal Investigation Committee in Helena over the course of 3 weeks. I gave them the files I'd carried out of the safe in my coat, the Veritas disposal records, the Apex Predator Resilience Program protocols, the photographs of Specimen 7, Danton's memo on county letterhead in his own hand. The story made national news for a while, the illegal dumping, the corruption, the deaths reclassified from wilderness accidents to homicides. Veritas Extraction Group is being dismantled in the courts. 3 Forest Service supervisors and 4 officers of the county sheriff's department have been indicted. The research organization behind the Helix logo, the one Clara Voss worked for, has proven much harder to find, dissolving like smoke the moment the light touched it, and I have come to understand that they are still out there, still wanting what Clara died carrying, and that the basin is not as closed a matter as the committee would like to believe. They asked me, of course, about the creature. I told them the truth, all of it, the prints and the posed bodies and the voices and the yellow eyes in the dark of the mine. They wrote it down. They did not believe it. The official finding attributes the deaths to the criminal conspiracy in the wilderness, and the thing in Black Antler Basin is a footnote about the unreliability of a traumatized witness, and that suits me fine. I never wanted them to send men up there to find it. Some warnings should be left standing. Eli Mercer is in a facility in Spokane. He's better than he was. He still won't sleep with the lights off. We don't talk, but I sent word once that I was glad he made it out, and word came back that he was glad too, and that's the whole of our friendship, and it's enough. Clara Voss is listed as missing, presumed dead in the basin. Her body was never recovered. Neither was the case. I left Hollow Creek. I took a desk job in Missoula, a house at the edge of town with neighbors close on either side and street lights and the ordinary noise of people, and I told myself the isolation had finally gotten to me, and that any man would want walls and light and company after what I'd seen. That's most of the truth. Last night I found out the rest of it. I was at my desk late, the house quiet, when I heard a scratching at the window behind me. Slow, deliberate, claws on glass, drawn down in long even strokes, the way you'd score a line, the way you'd write. By the time I got the porch light on, and the door open, there was nothing in the yard but the dark and the ordinary streetlit street, and my neighbors' houses with their windows black. There was something on the porch, lying on the boards just past the door, where I couldn't miss it. A black antler, broken off, ragged at the base, the way a living tree breaks when something wrenches it apart with its hands. From an elk, I think, though the color was wrong, too dark, almost charred, the color of the dead trees in the basin. Black Antler Basin, 200 miles east, where I'd walked out and left a thing in the dark with the understanding between us that I would carry the warning and read the names and tell it true. I'd done that. I'd kept my end. And I had thought, walking out of that basin 7 months ago, that keeping my end was the price of my life, paid in full, done. I stood on my porch in Missoula with the broken black antler at my feet, and I understood, the way you understand a thing too late, what the message was. It wasn't a thank you. It wasn't even a warning to stay away. It had found me, 200 miles from its home, in a city, behind walls, under streetlights, in the middle of other people. It had walked all that way, past every other man and woman in this state, to scratch its name on my window and lay its mark on my door. It was telling me it could. It was telling me that the list is not closed, that the people in the Helix logo are still reaching for what Clara died holding, that there will be another basin and another reckoning, and that when it comes, it knows exactly where I sleep. The witness is also the leash. As long as I tell it true, I live. The day I stop, the day I'm tempted to let it lie buried in quiet, the day I become a lid keeper like Roy Danton, the dark knows the way to my door, and it walks on two legs, and it remembers my name. I brought the antler inside. It's on my desk now. I look at it while I write this down, all of it, every name, the whole true account, so that if I ever go missing, there's a record, and someone reads it, and someone finally believes. I keep the lights on. It doesn't help. I knew it wouldn't. Out there past the streetlights, 200 miles or 200 feet, the forest is patient, and it is silent, and it is watching, and it knows our secrets, and it is not finished. It's never finished.